Today we are going to be talking about fixing floorboards back down after you've ripped them up and made a complete mess out of them. If your job in any way involves removing floorboards and putting them back, please watch this video. So folks, you know how it is. You've been doing some work on a house and you've had to cut some floorboards to get under the floor, and it's now time to put your floorboards back. And I'm going to give you a few tips today. Please, honestly, some of the horror stories in this house are just unbelievable. Let me show you the wrong way of doing it, and then I'll show you my preferred way of fixing floorboards back down to make sure that it's actually just as good as when you lifted them up in the first place. So first of all, the wrong way of doing things. For starters, when you cut your floorboards out, and whether you're using a circular saw or a multi-tool or whatever you're going to be using, try to do your cut in the middle of the joist, and then you're going to save yourself loads of work when you come to actually put the floorboards back. In this situation, they've just not bothered with that. They've cut this board right on the edge of the joist, and they've had no option but to nail another bit of wood into the side of the joist to take up the floorboard when they put it back. That's just a stupid way of doing things. Do the cut on the nail line. And I know you can end up damaging the blade on your circular saw when you do that, because you will end up accidentally catching nails and things. And that's why I've got a circular saw with a blade that's designed for cutting wood and metal that is dedicated to floorboard work. And I only use it pretty much for floorboard work, very rough timber work and stuff like that. But it will happily slice through nails, no problem. Just look for where all your nail holes are going down the floorboards. That'll be where your middle of the joist is. Cut down that line, even if it means cutting through the nails. Do not cut on the joist edge. That is tip number one. Good, bad, good, 10 out of 10. And you can see where I've sliced straight through the nails. Bad, absolute mess. And I've just spotted a death nail. Oh, look at that. Another one I've missed. And that neatly brings me on to my second point. I'm going to remove this death nail before I accidentally rip my wrist open on it. Great. Yet another floorboard to fix. That neatly brings me on to my second tip. You know how it is. You've cut the floorboard in the wrong place, and now you're going to have to put a support under there. Don't just use an off-cut of floorboard as your support. It's just not wide enough. It doesn't have the girth needed to support any kind of meaningful weight. When you screw into that, it's just going to split. My preference is just to use a piece of 3x2 as your support when you come to kind of fix these problems. 3x2 in the UK, it's like your 38x63. It's the stuff that Wix and B&Q have piled up in massive stacks all over the place. It's normally about £4 a length or something. It used to be about £2.50 a length, I'm sure. That's like shot up in price. Anyway, this isn't a 3x2. This is 50x60, so it's a little bit bigger, but it'll do the job even better. And that's going to go there like that. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to bolt it in using these big Timco screws. Now that's not actually going to make it through because of that stupid bit, which has 4,000 nails attached. I'm going to have to get that bit out. I mean, they've gone to the effort of putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nails holding that in, but it's not even at the right height. Whenever you're fitting a new support, pull it tight up against your floorboards to make sure that it's sitting at the height of the existing joist. And you see, that's like nearly 5mm lower than the existing joist. Ugh, it just annoys me so much. So, 3 of those big timber screws will be fine here. And as I say, I'm just going to line it up. I'm just going to work out where I'm going to put my screws first. One there, one there, one there. Obviously make sure you can actually get access to them. And I do always pre-drill, even with the timber screws. So this is what I'm using, not sponsored, it's just what I like to use. 6.7 by 100. You can get the wafer head ones and you can get the hex head ones. I prefer the hex head generally because absolute worst case scenario you can get like a socket wrench on them, and it means like in the future if someone has to like take these off, or even when it comes to you tightening them up, if you can't get like a drill into the gap, you can potentially use a socket wrench. Whereas on your wafer head Torx ones, well, you could potentially still use a socket wrench. Anyway, that's what I'm using. And as I say, pull it up tight to your existing floorboards. So make sure that whatever you're using is slightly longer so you can pull it up tight to the floorboards that are already in. And that ain't going anywhere. Where's my floorboard for there? I've lost it already. And then when it comes to attaching your floorboards back in, do yourself a favour, just get some self-drilling screws. I like to use the Turbo Golds. 5x50s I find work really well. If you're finding that your boards are splitting, you're either going to have to pre-drill your holes a little bit just to remove a little bit of the material from the floorboards. As I say, these are self-drilling screws, but sometimes if the floorboards are very, very dry, then they can be subject to splitting. If you want to save yourself that hassle, you can use 4x50s instead. They're not quite as strong, but honestly, it'll be fine. I've never had a problem with 4x50s, but generally I prefer 5x50s. And by the way, for whatever reason, Screwfix's Turbo Gold screws are now orange. And from what I can tell, the old goldy coloured ones were made in Taiwan and the new orange ones are made in China. So I need to call them Turbo Orange. And I know that's not exactly the neatest floorboard in the world, but it's going underneath a wall, so I don't care. And one other thing, if your floorboards aren't level, use some little spacers underneath just to get your top level perfect again. You can use plastic spacers if that's all you've got, although you do find if you drill through them they'll probably split. So normally I try and carry around a selection of like little 1 and 2 millimeter wooden spacers that I've made myself, and I use that for that exact job where I just need to bring the floorboard perfectly up to level with the adjacent board. As an added tip, if you glue your wooden spacers to the bottom of the floorboards with a drop of CA glue, then you'll not lose them if you ever need to lift the boards in the future. Also, needless to say, whenever you're doing work like this, do check for pipes and cables. You can do a bit of a reach around under the joist you're working on to check for unexpected surprises, something I'd recommend as a general life lesson. And just as a bit of an update on Screwgate, I've been having all sorts of problems with Screwfix's own brand screws recently, so sadly I'm no longer recommending them. Turbo Gold and Quicksilver screws have been a reliable choice for 20 years or so, but something seems to have changed. Quicksilver screws keep coming out and I'm hearing multiple reports of Turbo Gold snapping. I've raised this with Screwfix via X and I'll keep you posted with any updates. Gosforth Handy on X if you want to follow along, but after putting the word out on X and Instagram, it would appear I'm not the only person experiencing these issues. In the interests of supporting a British company, I'll probably try more Timco screws in the future, but it does mean replacing my entire screw stock. If you've had problems with Screwfix screws recently or you know what's changed, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Watch this space for future developments surrounding Screwgate. Do it like that and every trade that comes along after you is going to love you. And this is part of the thing about having pride in your work and doing a good job, and not just doing your job well, but making sure that when the next tradesperson comes along, you haven't made life more difficult for them. Because in this house, the floorboards are in such a state that I've got about a day's worth of work to fix all the problems with floorboards being like not level and massively lower than the adjacent board and not supported properly. Some of them feel like you're just going to literally drop through the floor because they've used nothing more than about a bit of wood like that. to attach the next board along. And you know what it is? It's just a bodge and it's a bit rubbish. So do stuff like this, make everyone else's life easier, and then everything just ends up being better and everyone's happier, and you can go off and have a cup of coffee and a cup of tea and just sit and bask in the glory that you've left the job better than when you first arrived. Maybe that's the kind of moral of this. Never leave a job where you've left things worse than when you started. And that includes leaving junk under the floors, by the way. Don't get me started on that one. Folks, as per usual, if you've got any extra tips to add to this, I would love to hear from you. Pop them down in the comments below. If you want to know more about this 1930s renovation project I'm working on, do hit subscribe. The button's literally just there on the screen. For now, folks, as per usual, look after each other, be nice to one another. We shall see you next time. Tatty bye!